But thank you for coming. This is in many ways the project we are trying to tackle. It's in many ways more fundamental to Trinity and Trinity's future than anything I can think of having done in the past 20 odd years that my family has been members here. It's more fundamental than ultimately getting a new priest or getting Tim back. Just a background, our steam heating system has been in a failure mode for many years. There are three major components to that system, and some of this stuff is going to be real technical. Please try to go along with it, because the nuances matter in the end. That steam heating system obviously has a boiler. Check, right? It has pipes going to radiators. Those are high pressure pipes. They carry steam. They are asbestos insulated, which was state of the art when that was done. And these days, we tend to run the other way when we hear that word. The third major component is condensate return pipes. That is when the steam gives off the heat in the radiators and keeps us nice and cozy. It condensates back down into hot water, and that hot water gets returned to the boiler, which kicks in and turns it back into heat, and the whole thing continues. What we have been able to observe is that the condensate return pipes have been failing for years. Here a leak, there a leak, everywhere a leak, that sort of stuff. And we don't know for sure what the inside of those pipes look like, but we do know they're rotting from the inside out. And we can only guess at the state of the high pressure steam pipes, but it's not likely any better than the condensate return pipes that we keep patching. A couple of weeks ago, we had a leak at the bottom of the narthex in the church. We had Petkowski in. To fix it, they had to cut out 20 feet of pipe before they found a spot solid enough that they could reconnect and plug that hole. So this is not a system that has much lifetime left in it. And we are worried about a catastrophic failure. What's a catastrophic failure? Well, a condensate return pipe leak is not a catastrophic failure. We've been patching those for years by now. If one of the high pressure pipes blows, it'll end up blowing through the asbestos insulation while we are at it. And what do you think happens at that time?
It's raining asbestos.
It's raining asbestos.
Major cleanup.
Huge cleanup. What do we as a congregation do at that time?
Not be anywhere near that.
Not be anywhere near that for at least a year at a huge expense. Okay, this is the sort of stuff that's going on in the back of the minds of the Building and Grounds Committee and its heating system group when we are trying to figure out what do we need to do.
Peter, what would it be doing to the, say, the organ pipes if that catastrophic?
Tough question, but here is a thought. The air pump for the organ is in the basement. The bulk of these pipes is in the basement. The organ air pump pulls in air from the basement. There is a possibility, I cannot say it will happen, but there is a possibility, depending on which pipe and where it blows, that asbestos gets sucked into that air pump and spreads through the organ pipe right up into the sanctuary. I don't mean to alarm anybody, but those are the kinds of scenarios we are thinking about when we are saying this is not a tenable situation. Another thing we could do is simply say, okay, we're done here. We're not doing anything about the heating system. we've got a bit over $4 million in our endowment. Let's take that endowment, look at it as a dowry, and see what other congregation we could join. I think there might be quite a few who would look at us and say, yes, please. But I don't think we are ready to do that. Okay, so yeah, Jamie.
Was there ever any thought by the committee to abandon the one pipe steam system? Just abandon it in place. I've done this before. Abandon it in place. You don't touch the asbestos, so you don't have the expenses, the abatement, which is the big chunk of the cost. Abandon that boiler system. Put in a furnace system which would be like a heat pump in the basement of the church. We're talking about the church is where the big problem is, right?
Church, Jim, Hoytrum, we'll get to that.
We got room in that basement. We don't use it for scouts anymore or church vestments or anything like that. Put a furnace in there, which would be a much less than a boiler system. Sure, we'd have to run new ductwork. So then it comes to what do you do in the church as far as the radiators are on a fin tube that runs around the outside. Just leave that in place. Or you could boot up where that is and have furnace supply, which you could also get air conditioning.
Yeah. Well, let's talk through these alternatives, and leaving the existing piping in place because of the expense,
right,
is part of the agreements of that's got to be done that way. Nobody wants to touch the existing pipes.
Were you referring to going to a hot air system?
Yeah.
Very inefficient compared to a water system.
Yeah, let's
Transfer.
yep. Hang on. Let's get.
We need to hear from a representative of the committee before we all jump.
Thank you. So we started working on this in earnest in 2022. And we are looking at the time, and if some of you may remember, we did a forum at the time, and we talked about heat pumps and energy efficiency and green and creation care and all those considerations. And we were looking for the most affordable solution, both in terms of upfront and operational cost. And the very first thing we asked our engineers about is, well, what if we go to a heat pump system? In 2022, heat pumps worked down to about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. At the chart at the bottom here may be hard to read, but 5 degrees Fahrenheit is the red dashed line. And the blue line below it is the annual low temperature for the last 25 years. If we go further back in time, it probably comes down even more on the left, on the older years. But the point is, we are in the 2020s in Binghamton. We are substantially away from being able to rely on heat pumps only. It gets too cold out there. That would require a backup heating system. Ouch. Because now we're looking at some sort of a dual system. And given the estimated expense, yes, absolutely the best from operational efficiency, but huge upfront outlay. We said regretfully, no. That was 2022. There are some interesting updates. So heat pumps alone at that time wasn't going to work. So, okay, looking at a heating system only with a traditional furnace of some sort. Now this gets detailed. The recommendation from our engineers was abandon steam, go with hot water. It is much more energy efficient. So check for operational cost. We are fortunate, whoever put in that big steam boiler downstairs, which still has a few years left, put in a steam boiler that can be converted to hot water. So we don't need to replace the boiler while we are at it. Another nice saving. Next thing we did was what we might call right sizing. We all know, Jamie, you alluded to it, nothing is happening in the church basement at this time. The so-called third floor upstairs in Trinity House, there's very, very, very little happening up there. There's one office in use up there. We can put a space heater into that if needs be. So
That's Parish House.
oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you for keeping me honest. I think I will rely on you a couple more times before I'm done. Thank you. Parish House upstairs, one office is regularly used. That doesn't justify, replacing the system in all of the offices up there. And for these unused spaces, like the church basement, Parish House upstairs as the key spaces, we are looking at freeze protection only. We don't want any of the water pipes or drainage pipes that are spread throughout there to freeze on us. That's not worth it. And more details later on in some of what you alluded to already, Jamie. Now, having told you that in 2022 there were no heat pumps on the market that would be able to serve our needs, we are in 2025. And now I'm going to go political on you. The Biden DOE started a competition with the HVAC manufacturers on, can you build us heat pumps that work down to about -20 Fahrenheit? And you remember the chart? -20 was at the very bottom, and we didn't hit it in any of the last 25 years. I think -18 was the closest we came. So is it perfect? No, but it might be worth exploring that further. The first,
You're saying reevaluate going strictly heat pump?
possibly, yeah. The very first of those super high or super low temperature heat pump systems are showing up in the market in 2025, this year. Some of the other manufacturers that haven't announced the availability of that type of heat pump yet have said they'll have something in 2026. So we've asked our engineers, let's take another last look at this. The beauty, of course, of heat pumps is it doesn't get more efficient than a heat pump. No matter what we do, right, Jamie?
Yeah, no, heat pump's the way to go if we can afford it.
Thank you. So we've asked our engineers to take another look at it.
Who are our engineers?
Our engineer is Watson Engineering on Route 434 in Appalachian. The lead engineer is John Evangelista, and he's got a team of 3, a senior engineer and 2 junior engineers working on this. Very, very happy with it. We got him on a recommendation from Linda Shoemaker. Very happy with him. So we've asked them to take a look at, is this a viable alternative? And for us, the question continues to be, what's the upfront cost? And what's the operational cost? We want to understand that before we make a final recommendation on left or right. Many of the modern systems, and we hope to find this here too, are so-called ductless systems. You've got the compressor outside, you've got the line going in, and somewhere on the wall, you've got a unit hanging that blows the cold or warm air, as the case may be. That avoids the cost of ducting, which in 2022 would have been a major component of a heat pump-based portion of the system. And again, I must emphasize, we don't know yet at this moment whether heat pumps are feasible for us. We are just starting to look into that.
Peter, you don't have the duct to run, but every one of those VFR, they're called VFR units, that's producing the air conditioning or heating, you still have to run copper tubing to those, and you have to run a condensate line.
Yeah.
So that adds to the expense as well as the difficulty to install it.
Yeah.
And you don't want to see these modern heat pump units hanging in the church. They want it concealed, and it can be concealed. It's if the design is right.
Yeah. You notice here, we put on here, appearance in the sanctuary is key.
Sound,
The sound,
sound to noise.
they would produce noise. Okay, so in the gym, I don't think anyone would care. In the sanctuary, we start to care a lot. So for the sanctuary, we may have to look at ducting, which brings the cost up. So there's a lot of unanswered questions that are being explored for this heat pump alternative. We just don't know yet whether it's going to be feasible for us. We don't know how much the upfront cost is. Operational cost, okay, we can guess that that's going to be the least painful of all the alternatives. And AC in the church would be nice. Let's be honest. But we don't know yet. We are investigating. Now, let me take you through what is behind the almost $750,000 for the heating, for the hot water only approach. So forget about heat pumps right now. We are back to looking as we started in 2022 with replacing this system with a hot water system. And when we, before I get into the details, you probably know we've got two heating systems totally independent of each other in our campus. There is that steam heating system that heats the church, sacristy, chancel, the Hoyt room, and the gym. And am I missing one? Church, Hoyt room, gym, parish house upstairs. And interestingly enough, the parish house ground floor hallway only, and the church basement. Kitchen at present seems to be unserved. Keep that in mind. We'll get back to that later. The parish house ground floor, the offices there, we were surprised to find are actually hooked up to the hot water system which serves Trinity House. And that makes sense because buildings and grounds office over there, lots of meetings in these rooms. So that's used heavily to run that off that hot water system. With the offices that over there, same thing, heavily used. Does make sense. It was a very efficient approach to dealing with that. The various shadings here are proposed zones. Not a detail I want to get into unless somebody wants to specifically talk about it, and we can do that. But just to get an understanding of what does that steam heating system actually cover right now. Watson Engineering, and we engaged them, and we've gone through the first two phases of this project. And again, this phase is something to keep in mind. We'll refer back to it later. And we are currently in the so-called design development phase. That means they are going down to every last inch. Here is a pipe, there needs to be a pipe, there needs to be a valve, and really refine this down so that design is complete, finished, and final. And the next step that they would do for us is develop the contract documents, which we take out to our major HVAC firms locally for a construction bid and then ultimately contractor selection. So we've made quite a bit of progress in designing that hot water system. And we are getting close to where we would do the contract documents and go to bid. Construction would be next year. Now, going back to Jamie's comment that there are all kinds of ways in which you can configure such a hot water system, we looked at a large number of options. Recommendation number one would have been to build 2 boilers, 1 redundant boiler, which is actually the configuration of the hot water system that heats Trinity House and the office suite. There are 2 boilers there operating in standby mode. So one of them goes down, the other one will kick in and produce heat. All kinds of different piping layouts, basically to address the efficiency at which the system operates. Temperature control going hand in hand with a very detailed and rich and expensive piping layout to really allow us to adjust temperature in each zone uniquely without impact anywhere else. Again, that goes to the efficiency of the system. And then we said, okay, the ROM sizing for that very early sizing with a large amount of contingency came in at 1.4 million. And we just said, never mind, we can't do that.
What does ROM stand for?
Rough order of magnitude. Thank you. So we started to look at options. First, remove the redundant boiler. We don't have one on the steam heating system today. So removing the redundancy, yeah, it increases the risk. If the boiler goes down, we're going to be without for some amount of time. But it's not a regression from where we are today. We have only 1 boiler today. This doesn't change the picture. We looked at the next option, and I alluded to that earlier, which is instead of replacing the boiler, convert the existing steam boiler to hot water. It is suboptimal from an operational perspective. Here's a tidbit. The converted steam boiler would run at 180 degrees Fahrenheit hot water, and the system would ideally be laid out for 150 degrees. So we're off a little bit, but I think we can live with that. It's a significant cost savings. And as Jamie, sorry, not that wasn't on your list. We could just stay with steam and replace all the pipes and radiators. Given the conversion capability of our existing boiler, that didn't make a lot of sense, but we talked about it. And now here comes a term that we all learned. There's a lot of terms we all learned. Value engineering, which is the engineers taking a close look at space utilization, at infrastructure, at anything you can think of, and propose ways to simplify the system to bring down the cost of it. Okay, so that's what value engineering means. Figure out how we can build a less expensive system that still delivers us a good degree of comfort. Here are some of the value engineering items that we looked at, and pretty much all said, yes, let's do that. Abandon the existing ACM covered, ACM asbestos containing material pipes in place. Don't touch them. Just leave them and abandon them. And if somebody digs 2,000 years hence into this area and finds lots of asbestos, not just in our basement, but everywhere they'll wonder what this culture really was about. Their problem, not our problem.
Unanswered, basically.
We abandon this stuff in place. PEX plastic piping instead of copper saved a huge chunk of money. Copper is the gold standard as far as I know. plastic piping is used a lot, and it seems to be reliable. Conventional or non-condensing boilers. If you've had the pleasure of having to replace a boiler, a gas boiler in your own home, you will likely have been faced with 98% efficiency or low 90% efficiency. The difference is this word condensing. A condensing boiler takes the hot air that it produces, condenses it and recaptures as much of that heat as possible, and then just lets essentially room temperature air out in an outlet pipe that goes out somewhere on the side of your building. It no longer goes up the chimney. It's not hot enough to produce a draft in your chimney. That's a condensing boiler. They are more expensive than the non-condensing kind, and the unit we have downstairs is a non-condensing kind, obviously, as a steam boiler of a certain vintage. But we looked at what would that save if we were to replace that boiler, what would that save? And yes, it would save some upfront cost. But this one is ultimately a no-op. Instead, no-op meaning we're not going to do it. Sorry, tech geek talk. Direct piping is essentially what we have now, as opposed to the more complicated types of piping. Really get every last bit of efficiency out of that system. Go to direct piping, which is what we have now, not a regression, not as optimal as it could be, but again, it brings down the cost of the project quite a bit. Similarly, a constant flow design where the water just flows at a constant speed through the pipes in the zones that call for heat, as opposed to varying the flow high or low as conditions indicate. Again, not a regression from what we have right now, but a little less efficient. So you get the idea that many of the areas we looked at for cost savings bring down the initial cost substantially. You remember my article in the Trinity Times, maybe? We are down from 1.4 million to, at that time, 774, I think. Did I remember that right, Phil?
Pretty close.
Thank you. I've had a problem with remembering that number correctly. So a significant drop in reduction in the upfront cost, but it comes at the cost of operational efficiency in the longer term. I already mentioned we heat only the actively used areas, and for anything else, in particularly the church basement and the parish house upstairs, freeze protection only, which again greatly simplified the system design. Now, we've thrown around some numbers, or at least I've thrown around some numbers. Think back at the project phases. There was the concept phase, which had a rough order of magnitude estimate. Then came a schematic design phase, which produced a lot of refinement, but it's still a step away from the detailed design, which is what we are currently working on. And after each of these design phases, our engineers ship the design materials off to a third-party cost estimator who comes back and says, this is what this is likely to cost when you go out and get bids. It's important to realize that they use a conservative approach to estimating. They don't ever want to end up in the situation where they estimate a project is going to cost $750,000 and it comes in at 100,000 more by the time it goes to bid. So they will, through built-in contingencies, raise the ceiling, bring in the number a bit on the high side, so that by the time we go to bid, there are actually no surprises. Subject to policy from Washington, we can't forget that totally. But there are no surprises from an engineering perspective, and that based on prevailing market conditions, these estimates will be met, if not come in under what they estimate. Okay, and as I said, every phase they go forward and the design becomes more refined, those contingencies drop. One of them that I found sort of amusing, not being an engineer, is early on, in order to estimate the length of the piping, they basically used the circumference of our buildings, multiplied it by 2, and said that's the amount of piping we'll need. And very early on, that's not an unreasonable approach. That's worked for them. So we've got to trust them as professionals that this is a realistic approach. But it gives you a sense of once we go from, well, twice the circumference of the buildings down to, okay, here's a pipe and there's a pipe and there is no pipe and that sort of stuff. And here's where they're running. These contingencies are successively removed and replaced by design details. Okay, now going back in September, we had exited or completed the schematic design phase. Remember, concept, schematic design, detailed design. So the middle of those 3 phases. And of the options that were on the table, the most comfortable and reliable system, option 1, would have come in at $1.5 million. No value engineering, just this is the state-of-the-art system, best we can deliver. The next option or sub-option, replacing the condensing boilers with conventional boilers, that made a huge difference. We're down $300,000. That's nice. And taking that one step further, as I discussed earlier, using one conventional boiler brought it down further yet. So you see, some of the effects of going through this value engineering process and trying to figure out what can we live with, what would be in line with what we have today. One boiler, no standby, very simple flow for the steam. And then we had option 3 and 4. Option 3 is to convert the existing steam boiler to hot water and include this long list of value engineering items. And option 4 is to stay with steam, stay with the steam boiler, just replace piping and radiators so we don't suffer a blowout. And the difference, 638 versus 774, there's a noticeable difference there. But the bottom line that sticks us with a system that really was designed 60 or 80 years ago, the steam system, that's a lot of money to just tread water, if you so will, or tread the same water all over again. So we asked our engineers for a comparison of those two. And knowing the upfront cost as of the schematic design phase, we asked for what's the life cycle cost? And very clearly, option 3, which is to convert that steam boiler and go with hot water everywhere, value engineered, as we went through the list, is more efficient than sticking with steam. And depending on how gas prices develop over the next decade or so, we could recover the option 3's higher upfront cost, 774 versus 638. We could discover that in 15 years. And by the way, this includes no increase in gas prices. If gas prices go up, which I think most of us will agree they're likely to do, that reduces that payback period from 15 years down to something much shorter. Could be 10 years, could be 7 years. And we looked at each other and said, that's worth proposing to the Vestry. So in September, we proposed to the Vestry that we should pursue that option 3, a hot water system with all that value engineering that we had briefly looked at, convert the existing boiler, and let's go forward with that. The Vestry agreed and referred the how do we pay for that to the Finance Commission. But from an engineering perspective, that's clearly the way to go, as we knew at that time. Now, since that September meeting, we've gone deep, our engineers have gone deep into the detailed design phase, and they have provided us an updated estimate based on a number of items they found. First of all, due to design refinements, we have some radiators that they had proposed that we said, nope, Tim does not want a radiator in the chancel. Okay, so let's take that out. And there was a misreading of our floor plan. So we actually ended up with a radiator. They thought it was inside, but it's outside. So we cleaned all that up. They continue to refine the design based on the constant flow and straightforward piping design and what have you. And the estimators came back and said, well, that's almost 78K less expensive. Good news. However, when we want to remove the radiators, for instance, in the church, we can't fully avoid getting near the asbestos insulated piping. So there's going to be a small amount of asbestos abatement that needs to be done, just so that the installers can, in essence, saw through the pipes and remove the radiators and leave the pipes in place. So sadly, there is also an addition here, estimated at 25K. And while we are at it, that includes labeling the pipes left behind as contains asbestos, so that anyone in the future knows that not to touch those or not to touch those without the right mitigation factors in play. And we are now down currently to a new estimate of 722, if I round correctly. It's progress. It's still very expensive. Kitchen. I mentioned earlier, and this is again something that we just found out maybe a month ago. There is a radiator in our kitchen. It's not working. There is a space heater in the, if you look in this way, in the far left corner hanging from the ceiling. It's not working either. The kitchen has not had heat in God knows how long. We haven't been able to find somebody. Well, we haven't done a comprehensive survey of the congregation, but it hasn't had heat based on the folks we talked with in many years. And yeah, the stoves produce a lot of what's considered waste heat. So we've never had a freeze in there. I've heard on occasion on very cold days, you could see the breath, but turn on the stove, start cooking, and it's warm enough. Rather, in the kitchen, we'll get to that. So for the moment, we just told our engineers, remove the kitchen from your design altogether. And that should save us another little bit of money while we are at it. How much? We don't know yet. Now, Frank Donahue, I'm sorry he isn't here because he deserves some accolades here. Has proposed a separate project to put heat pumps for AC and maybe heating into the kitchen. And the most sore spot in the kitchen is obviously summer heat and the humidity produced by the dishwasher hanging off in that alcove on the side. So no, this made immediate sense that this is an area we don't need. Remember the 5 degrees Fahrenheit limitation? We don't need a efficient super cold temperature heat pump in there. It's enough if we can get a heat pump in there to take the humidity out. AC is the sore spot, not lack of heat. And Frank proposed that we look into these split duct systems for the kitchen and dishwasher alcove, the dining room, and maybe the common room, based on community use. And he's willing to pursue a grant from one of the local foundations to cover that. So this is a parallel, independent project. The only intersect with the big heating system project is the kitchen is no longer covered in the big heating system project. Now, again, everything I'm showing you next is speculative. I need to be very, very clear about that. And you'll see this disclaimer at the bottom of any of the charts coming up next. We don't know yet whether the heat pump approach is feasible. If for the sake of example, these super low temperature heat pump systems are house-sized, how many of them would we have to acquire to heat the church? So, there's a lot of big unanswered questions. The first thing we know is these heat pumps exist. We don't know yet whether they are capable enough to deal with the church, the gym, Hoyt room, probably, but we don't know yet. We don't know the upfront cost. We know almost nothing other than that they exist, and we're looking into it to see what does that mean for us. We are currently determining feasibility. The engineers were here on Wednesday, I think, to take a look and measure. And in conversations that we've had, totally informal, totally informal, potential placement for the compressor units would be on the roof of Parish House and Gym or in the alley next to social services. So they're by and large out of sight. The outside units. Inside units, well, that's a different question. And that's why I've got a picture here of the interior. If we try these ductless units, then the interior portions, I'm sorry, I forget the term, Jamie, VRFs, thank you. Those would be hanging potentially on the side of our church interior. I don't think that's anything any one of us, I include myself here very explicitly, is looking forward to.
You might be able to put them in the basement and boot them up in the existing radiator cabinet, and you wouldn't even know it.
Yeah, thank you. So there is some real hard work that needs to go on to figure out how that works. But none of us thinks that hanging them on the side above the windows is something we would want to do. However, any kind of ducting increases the cost while we are at it. So no, we don't know yet. We'll let you know once we figure out something we can actually bank on, so to speak. So our final destination, as it stands today, on the 23rd of November of 2025, remains to be determined. We don't want to lose sight of our timeline. We want to do something next year because the system is not getting healthier from the inside out. And we have been patching holes in the condensate return pipes for so many years by now. We actually installed a water treatment system to slow down the interior deterioration. But nobody has a comfortable feeling that we can drag this out much longer. So we don't want to lose sight of the timeline. We really would like to address this next year. Having our engineers work up a total alternate approach is going to cost a bit more engineering money, we will need to cover that. That's only fair. And I think that's the way we think of ourselves as a congregation. We're not asking them to do a freebie. And what we are hoping for is to get a reasonable upfront cost estimate for both approaches. And now I need to take you back once more to concept of order of magnitude, schematic design, detailed design. Remember, on the steam system, it came down every time as details became clearer and contingency was removed. For the heat pump system, we are going to end up with a rough order of magnitude concept level estimate. So this could conceivably come in a bit on the high side compared to what it eventually costs. But because there is far less complexity with tubing for various zones and what have you, that might be okay. I'm guessing that we're going to get a useful estimate that allows us to propose to the Vestry continue with the hot water plan or switch gear and go to a heat pump approach. We're not there yet. We're just beginning to gather ideas on how one could do that. And again, we're interested in the upfront cost, obviously, and the operational cost. Again, there is a significant efficiency and benefit from on the operational side. So even if this comes in initially in the same ballpark as the hot water replacement system, the efficiencies are likely to make up for that. That's our best guess right now. And of course, we've talked a lot about appearance. I've actually thrown up a picture of our church interior as a reminder of what none of us wants. Also, we are on the National Register, so outside appearance changes are not necessarily straightforward. And again, going into the alley or on top of the parish house and gym would greatly help with that. Because that doesn't alter the outside appearance of the building. So where will we end up? I can't tell you that today. But what I wanted to do today is explain how the dickens did we end up with a proposal $748,000 $748K at the schematic design phase to replace that heating system. And no, we are not proposing to spend that much money because Building and Grounds likes to spend money. I think you've seen what we all went through to whittle this down and to make trade-offs between comfort and upfront cost and operational cost and all that stuff to bring that into a range that we can actually contemplate. Which leaves one question: what did the Finance Commission recommend to the Vestry? How do we finance that? I'm tempted to quote you Ecclesiastes here. There's a time to sow and there's a time to reap. The stock market, for reasons I cannot fathom, has been very, very generous to our endowment. And this might just be the time to finance this out of our endowment and to harvest what the stock market has, in a sense, given us. So the Finance Commission's recommendation was take it out of the endowment. There was a brief discussion on should we do a capital campaign, and the answer is no. We just finished the last one a year ago, I think, 2 years at most. It's too soon to do a capital campaign. If anybody feels generous towards contributing, donations are always truly gratefully accepted. That's no news to anyone here, but we are not soliciting donations towards the cost of this system. What else can I tell you?
Sorry, carrot interruption. Two things that this guy that worked in engineering for 25 years would like to know is a little more details on how you call it operational, I would call it routine maintenance and operation of each of the different options in the systems. And secondly, durability as far as, I mean, there was a reference a number of times to life cycle. How long is that life for each of the different options? Just a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting answers.
Thank
But
you.
you got to keep the damn engineers on the same page
Yep.
as you're on, or they'll come up with something that is not appropriate.
And no, your sister's recommendation of Watson Engineering, I think it worked out well. They are willing to work with us in making the right thing happen, something that we can cover out of the endowment, to downsize the detail and refinement of the system to something we can live with and can afford to put in. I'm happy with them, but I can talk about those questions with them while we are at it. What else?
Peter, can we apply to the diocese in Syracuse for a grant?
In theory, yes, but in practice, I suspect not.
What about NYSERDA? Can churches get NYSERDA grants?
That's a possibility.
It's a question for
Yeah.
the engineers.
Yeah.
Because the engineers should be able to tell us yes or no if we could get a NYSERDA grant that would help defray the costs.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, the heat pump unit is the
Rolls
Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
And the unit you're talking about on the roof is called a DOAS unit, a direct outside air unit. So the noise that I think, Sue, you were talking about of the units, the noise is up on the roof here because all the air exchange and stuff from the compressors and everything are up on the roof. And then all you would hear if they did put the VRFs down in the basement and they came up and you don't see anything, those are just a little squirrel cage blower. So there's very little noise involved in that. One thing on the abatement, the $25,000 for the asbestos abatement is low.
Yeah.
That's remove those asbestos pipes in the church.
We leave those pipes in place.
Leave them in, yeah.
We leave them in place. The only spots where we touch the asbestos insulation is where we have to disconnect them from the existing radiator, so we can take the radiators out.
But if you were to take all the asbestos
Oh
out,
God, yeah.
it'd be way higher than $25,000.
Yeah. So this low estimate is part of the leave them in place, mark them so that nobody ever touches them, as far as we can tell. Leave them in place, but where we disconnect the pipes, there's going to be a small impact.
You've done a great job with organizing all this and explaining it. I guess the last question I have is the DOAS unit is an air-to-air unit.
Mhm.
There's also a well. You can drill a well, say out here in the parking lot, and use well water to run the heat pumps. And the engineers looked at that.
They have not looked at that yet.
Drilling a well is good heat source also.
It's that is what I would call the platinum standard, not just gold, but platinum in terms of efficiency. The ground heat in a heat pump is unbeatable. Or operational expense upfront, well.
The other thing the heat pump system requires is a technician to keep an eye on it too. Because you're depending on the outside air, fluctuating outside air, and somebody's got to be knowledgeable to know how to keep that equipment maintained. You got to change filters, filters to be changed yearly. So a maintenance contract, I guess is what I'm saying, has to come with it.
Thank you. We've been happy with Petkowski doing on-demand maintenance and once a year just a general system check for us. So that would be an extension that if we go that way, that they need to do that too.
Well,
Thank
putting it out the bid is the best thing because Evans here in the area is also an excellent heating contractor, commercial heating contractor.
And thank you. Evans, Petkowski. One starts with S. They do the building we live in, Slavic. Those are the ones we know of at this stage that a bit of that size would go to. So, all right. Do you feel any better now about spending that much money knowing what's behind it?
I would just note how lucky we are to be blessed with this endowment, so that we can face this gigantic cost without it threatening all of that we're trying to do. We're still left in good shape. And secondly, thank you, Peter and Buildings and Grounds, for all of the work you've done.
Here, here.
Thank you, Peter.
All right. If there are no other questions, go forth in peace to serve the Lord.